Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a story that, honestly, it reads less like a standard political biography and way more like a high-stakes political thriller. We're talking about Asif Ali Zardari. He's a figure who's been labeled a master strategist, an ultimate survivor, and undeniably one of the most polarizing individuals in Pakistan's modern history. Just think about this for a second. Here is a man who went from spending years locked in a prison cell, fighting off severe allegations, to ultimately occupying the highest office in the land as the President of Pakistan. It's an absolutely incredible pendulum swing of a life.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly does an absolute outsider, someone who started on the extreme periphery of national power, navigate through a maze of extreme controversy, tragic loss, and intense legal battles to eventually reach the presidency? His story is a gripping, real-world study of sheer political resilience. And by unpacking his path, we can unlock a much deeper understanding of how power, perception, and survival actually operate in modern politics.
To make sense of this complex figure, we're going to follow his path in 5 stages. First, from outsider to insider. Second, power, prison, and perceptions. Third, when tragedy strikes. Fourth, the unexpected president. And finally, the ultimate political survivor.
Let's start with Section 1, from outsider to insider.
Before the global headlines and all the intense political battles, Zardari's life looked very, very different. He wasn't exactly groomed from birth to lead a nation. Born in Karachi in 1955 to a wealthy, influential landowning family from Sindh, he basically spent his early adulthood focused on family businesses, agriculture, and real estate. Prior to 1987, very few people would have predicted a path to national leadership for him. But that trajectory changed literally overnight when he married Benazir Bhutto, the highly prominent leader of the Pakistan People's Party. Just 1 year later, in 1988, she becomes prime minister. And just like that, Zardari is thrust into the absolute epicenter of Pakistan's political power structure.
Moving right along to Section 2, Power, Prison, and Perceptions.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute split in public perception. A sudden, massive leap into the corridors of power? Yeah, that doesn't go unnoticed. His proximity to his wife's government instantly sparked intense debate and deep polarization, a dynamic that basically became the defining theme of his entire career. To his supporters, Zardari was a steadfast, loyal partner supporting the prime minister in an incredibly turbulent political climate. But to his fierce critics, they saw someone who was leveraging his newfound political connections purely for personal financial gain. There was virtually no middle ground here. The public was sharply, totally divided.
This intense division actually crystallized into a very specific label. Political opponents began accusing him of taking massive commissions and kickbacks on lucrative government contracts, slapping him with the widespread moniker Mr. 10%. Now, it's absolutely critical to note that Zardari consistently and categorically denied any wrongdoing. Over the years, multiple investigations and court cases were launched both in Pakistan and abroad. A lot of these cases dragged on unresolved, some were eventually closed, and others simply failed to result in any lasting convictions. Yet, true or not, the sheer weight of these allegations fundamentally shaped his public image forever.
All of this intense scrutiny eventually led to one of the darkest and most difficult periods of his life. During the 1990s, the political outsider who had briefly touched the sun suddenly found himself facing the harsh reality of the prison system. He spent several years behind bars, fighting a whole variety of charges.
And just as before, the narrative around his imprisonment was perfectly split. He consistently maintained he was being targeted. His supporters loudly decried his imprisonment as blatant political victimization designed specifically to crush his family's influence. Conversely, his opponents firmly argued that these were absolutely necessary, legitimate investigations into very serious allegations of corruption. But regardless of where you fall on that debate, those long years in prison without lasting convictions did something crucial. They forged him. He emerged not as a defeated man, but with a highly resilient, totally hardened image of a political survivor.
Which brings us to Section 3, when tragedy strikes. I really want us to pause here for a second. December 27, 2007. This was the most defining, world-altering moment of Asif Ali Zardari's life. During an election campaign rally in Rawalpindi, his wife, Benazir Bhutto, was assassinated. It was an event that literally sent shockwaves across the globe. It plunged millions of supporters into deep, paralyzing mourning. And instantly, the future of the massive Pakistan People's Party, a foundational pillar of the nation's politics, was thrown into total, absolute uncertainty.
So the crucial point is what happens next. In the immediate aftermath of this profound crisis, with the party essentially headless and the entire nation grieving,
Zardari steps forward. The vast political legacy of Benazir Bhutto suddenly rested squarely on his shoulders. In this tragic crucible, his role fundamentally transformed. He was no longer just the controversial husband or the polarizing background figure. He was now the central, undeniable leader carrying the banner for one of Pakistan's largest political organizations.
Now for Section 4, the unexpected president. From the absolute depths of grief and political chaos, we get what is widely considered one of the most remarkable political comebacks in history. In 2008, following general elections, where the PPP emerged as the largest political force in the National Assembly, the unthinkable happens. Asif Ali Zardari, the very man who had spent years fighting legal battles from inside a prison cell, was officially elected President of Pakistan. I mean, really let that sink in. It is an extraordinary testament to his capacity to navigate invisible political undercurrents.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is his biggest policy achievement. While his presidency was definitely marked by huge economic and security challenges, his crowning legislative achievement was undoubtedly the 18th Constitutional Amendment. In a super rare political move, he actively reduced his own presidential powers, willingly transferring them over to strengthen Pakistan's parliamentary system. For his supporters, this calculated ceding of executive power stands as one of the most vital democratic reforms in the country's entire history.
And his presidency concluded with another major milestone in 2013, when Zardari actually completed his full presidential term. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was historically massive for the nation. It marked one of the very first democratic transfers of power between elected civilian governments in Pakistan's history. Against all odds, he had navigated his term and handed over the reins peacefully. Finally, Section 5, the ultimate political survivor.
Let's move to the next part and see how this builds his post-presidency playbook. Because after he left office, he didn't just fade into the background. He remained highly active, working closely with his son, Benazir Bhutto Zardari, to keep the party relevant. And in doing so, he built the ultimate survival masterclass. Step 1. Survive the whiplash of changing governments. Step 2. Endure relentless legal battles without letting them permanently derail your influence. And Step 3. Master the negotiation of incredibly complex, shifting alliances. Behind the scenes, he really earned a reputation as perhaps the most skilled political operator in the country, carefully constructing coalition politics even when faced with major setbacks.
So, as we look at his legacy today, we are left with the exact same duality that has defined his entire life. To his supporters, he's the ultimate survivor, the man who stepped up during a national tragedy, defended democracy, implemented massive constitutional reforms, and kept his party united. But to his critics, the enduring shadow of those corruption allegations makes him permanently one of Pakistan's most controversial and polarizing figures. Both of these narratives exist firmly, side by side in the history books. You really can't tell his story without both.
Which brings us to our final thought. When the definitive history of Asif Ali Zardari is finally written, is his legacy ultimately defined by the sheer weight of the controversies he managed to survive, or by the historic democratic transitions and constitutional reforms he actually secured? It's a complex question with no easy answer, but understanding his journey gives us a fascinating, raw look into the bare mechanics of political power. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.